Mileage, brought to you by Google's Bookkeepers. If you like the channel, please do subscribe, like and share. So the question that has been asked is, how much mileage am I entitled to? So if you are working for a company using your own car, and the question was that the company had been paying them 20p a mile, so and only up to a maximum of 100 miles. So they wanted to know, am I entitled to claim for the mileage that hasn't been paid to me? This is the conundrum. And the answer is yes, you are. So how does it work? If you incur business mileage using your private vehicle as an employee, you can receive what's called MAPs, mileage allowance payments from your employer. Now, a mileage allowance is monthly payments based on your business mileage, and it's based on reasonable business mileage estimation. A monthly lump sum, this is what the employer gives you to cover the reasonable estimates of your business mileage, or it could be a combination of the above. A monthly lump sum for your vehicle expenses and a fuel rate per mile at a lower reimbursement amount. So what is included in a mileage allowance payment? It's fuel, it's servicing and repairs, it's maintenance and depreciation, and insurance and road tax. That's what this lump sum amount is supposed to be for. What isn't included in the map is road or bridge or tunnel tolls, parking fees or congestion charges. And if you have a speeding or parking fine or other road offences, that isn't included in your mileage allowance payment. So the HMRC guidance, and this is on their website, so do check it out, in terms of rates per mile, is that they give you 45p for cars and vans for the first 10,000 miles. And then after 10,000 miles, the rate changes to 25p per mile. You get 24p per mile for motorcycles, regardless of the miles driven, and you get 20p per mile for bicycles, regardless of the miles. Now, what if you don't get this? As in our previous question, whereby they were only getting 20p and for the first 100 miles. Well, your employer might choose to reimburse you at a lower or at a higher rate. So the HMRC guidance is just that, it's guidance. So your employer isn't doing anything wrong or illegal if they pay you above or below the HMRC guidance. Key thing, check your employment contract. What does your employment contract say? Now, if you receive less than the advisory amount from your employer, you are entitled to tax relief. And that comes from HMRC, not the employer. Now, what if you are paid more than the HMRC guidance? Well, that amount is taxed. And if you are paid the HMRC approved amount, then there's nothing to do. The whole sum goes directly to you that you got from your employer, and you've got nothing to declare to HMRC. It's all dealt with, all taken care of, no problem. So when it comes to this tax relief, you're entitled to it if you're paid less than the HMRC approved amount. So what happens is you'll receive the whole sum from your employer, whatever they've given you, and you will be able to claim what's called mileage allowance relief, MAR, mileage allowance relief. Now you might have a question like, what if I have to drive colleagues for work? Well, you can receive reimbursement by your employer if you take fellow employees as passengers with you when driving for business. Many people don't know this, but passenger payments are available so long as both you and your colleague are travelling for work purposes, and HMRC has set an approved rate of 5p per mile per passenger. You're not allowed to claim it for motorbikes, only for cars, and it only comes from your employer. Now, when it comes to mileage allowance relief, MAR, do you need to provide records to receive a mileage allowance payment? Well, you'll need to prove to your employer that you've driven business mileage for each month to receive a MAP, a mileage allowance payment. So they should have some sort of process, some sort of system where You know, you submit your miles, you keep a mileage log of some sort. And as per HMRC guidance, a mileage log should contain the date and purpose of your trip, the distance travelled, the start and end address of each work-related trip, including postcodes. Now, these days, you can track your mileage on your phone, you can track it on your car, different ways to track it. So and you should just keep your mileage log perhaps in the glove compartment in your car, and just get into the habit of just completing it per trip. Don't try and remember at the end of the week. It is a bit of a guess. So just write it in as you go along. Keep a pen and maybe a clipboard with your mileage log in your glove compartment, and just keep your records like that. So beware that the mileage allowance payment, what it covers is your travel between your permanent workplace and your temporary workplace, for example, visiting clients or suppliers. And it can cover travel between two workplaces in the same employment, travelling from home to another workplace if home is your permanent workplace due to the requirements of the job. But do beware, ordinary commuting to and from work isn't considered a business trip. That's just you going about your daily life to get to work. This mileage allowance payment is about doing extra miles that you wouldn't have to normally do, but just in the course of your job, your duties, you've got to travel out and about. So let's say you're based in an office, say you're a social worker or a support worker, and you travel out to visit clients and you use your car, you travel to see them and you travel back to the office, that kind of thing. That is a, using your car for work purposes, because if you didn't use your car, how would you get there? You'd have to get a bus, you'd have to get a taxi, and that would be reimbursable by your workplace. If you were just coming into to work, your workplace wouldn't pay you to do that. They'd just expect you to get there. Private mileage isn't considered a business trip. So you nipping to the shop is not considered a business trip. Now, how to claim mileage allowance from HMRC. This is the important thing. If your employer pays you less than the approved mileage allowance, you are entitled to mileage allowance relief, MAR, MAR, in the form of tax deductions on the outstanding MAP, mileage allowance payment. So the MAP, the mileage allowance payment, that's provided to you by your employer, and the mileage allowance relief is what you get from HMRC for the difference. And it's you don't it's the difference that the underpayment, if you like, that your own employer hasn't given you up to the HMRC guidance amount. So very important now then, how to make your claim. Here's an example claim. So just for example, say you've driven 5,000 miles for work this year with your car and your employer has reimbursed you with 20p a mile. So if we times the miles by the rate, you've received £1,000 in mileage allowance from your employer. Now note that HMRC guidance is 45p a mile for the first 10,000 miles, then 25p thereafter. So you are entitled to claim mileage allowance relief for the additional 25p per business mile driven, because your own employer has not paid you up to the HMRC guided amount. So there would be 5,000 miles at 25p a mile. So you'd be entitled to £1,250 from HMRC. The way to make the claim is you need claim form P87 and you fill it in, and the example is on the page. If you usually do not need to complete a tax return, you use form P87, which you can get on the HMRC website, to claim your mileage allowance relief. Now, if your total expense claim is more than 2,500, says it on the form. If it exceeds 2,500, then you will need to complete a self-assessment tax return instead. Any other questions? Please do email in to admin@booglesltd.com. We're going to get through questions that people send us in. If you enjoy the content, please do subscribe, like, share the channel. Feel free to make a donation. That's what keeps the channel going. Thank you very much. Brought to you by Google's Bookkeepers.